Welcome to the first episode of Rockin' the Arts with Cowboy and Friends. Today I have Mr. Mike Ferrara, co-host, and we'd like to welcome Rockin, a facilitator of one of the more popular drum circles in the Hudson Valley. Welcome,
Thank you.
Rockin.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
So, how long have you been drumming for?
Personally, I've only been drumming for about 5 years. I think that, we all, see, drumming and rhythm, from a very young age, and we bang on counters and pans and pots and everything else. But actually playing these kinds of drums, about 5 years.
It seems like you've been drumming for a lot longer than that, but do you come from a musical background?
I play the guitar. I consider myself a 20-year-old beginner on playing the guitar. And I enjoy that, but I've been playing the drums. I enjoy playing the drums, but I also have a music business background, so I've always been around music and musicians and in that world.
So, tell us about your drum circles.
Sure. I have a drum circle in Poughkeepsie, New York, and it's started out years ago with other facilitators, 5 people, sometimes less. Sometimes I couldn't even have a circle because there weren't enough people. But that was before the day of social media and this age where we could connect via computer. So I put the word out, and community answered, and now we've got a circle that ranges anywhere from 30 to 100 people.
I tried to have a drum circle once, and one person showed up with harmonicas, and he was trying to bang them together, but it wasn't working. Yeah. Anyway, what type of people do come to these drum circles?
All kinds of people. People come with babies, toddlers dancing. I have a 90-year-old neighbor who comes. My mother, who's in her 70s, has been there. It's just all walks of life, all ages, all people, some that have never drummed before, some that have been drumming, for many, many years.
Well, Mike.
Well, I want to ask Lynn, if you don't mind, about facilitator. You mentioned that. What does a facilitator do?
It's kind of like a conductor. When you've got 100 people drumming, many of them who've never drummed before, somebody's got to keep them on the right track. So I usually start a basic beat for them and give them a few pointers and tips, and we get the show rolling and try to keep the energy up and the spirit up, the volume, bring it up or down. And there's usually other good players in the audience or in the circle as well. So between my facilitating and some of the better drummers, we usually keep it going.
How many how many people have attended these drum circles at one time, say?
I think the biggest one so far is 104 people.
Wow.
Yeah.
Have you ever been to one, Mike?
Well, as a matter of fact, yes. This is my very first drum circle, so I'm really excited. But I also heard about there's some spiritual aspects to it as well, right?
Sure. Not all drum circles, but certainly mine there is, or ours, I like to say. Usually when I have a drum circle, I try and weave in some type of a theme. Sometimes, that might be, the season, or it might be if we're having a real stormy night, or, if there's been, a passing of somebody, some icon, or people have been through a hard time in their lives. So I try to create a theme, and people can actually use the energy of the drum circle, put names into the drum circle, and bring those people, in as part of the group.
Really?
I understand that an icon in the drum circle world just passed away recently, Lane Redmond?
Lane Redmond, yes. She passed away recently. She was an icon in frame drumming, hand drumming, also, for the women's movement in drumming. And she did a lot of studies about drumming and goddess culture, and, has pictures of women that were actually holding drums similar to this one here. And in the museums, they said woman with cake pan. And she went about setting the record straight on some of those photos in some of those museums. This drum here actually was played by a student of hers who studied with her in Egypt for about 6 months.
Woman with cake pan? That gives new meaning to the phrase, woman's place is in the kitchen, right?
Yeah. Is that considered a frame drum?
It is considered a frame drum. There are many different kinds of frame drums. Some are made out of wood, some are ceramic.
And I'm guessing because they're built on a frame, sort of.
Mm-hmm.
That's an excellent guess. You're natural.
The spirituality of the. Do you think they could do a drum circle that would possibly be able to grow hair for him?
Well, thank you.
No.
Well, we could try.
Well,
we could try. No promises.
We'll do that today.
Well, as a matter of fact, I was bolder before we started today, and we beat the drum a little bit. And I think I grew another hair here. So.
Yeah, I think I see one sticking up there. Yeah.
Lynn, seriously, I recently read about a really large drum circle in New Paltz. Were you involved with that?
It wasn't actually a drum circle. It was a gathering, and they had a lot of, fairly famous drum performers there. It's called Million Women Drummers Gathering. It's an initiative, a global initiative. It was definitely an event and a gathering at Ulster County Fairgrounds. but it's also an ongoing initiative, and they're going to continue to have future gatherings. And it's really about sustainability of trees and musical instruments, whether they be drums, guitars, violins, pianos. All these instruments are made out of wood. So if we don't take care of the trees, we're not going to have these beautiful instruments or the beautiful music that they create.
That's funny that you should say that, because I just started building guitars, and I noticed that the different types of wood I use resonate a different tone.
Sure.
It all depends on the wood. It's pretty cool.
Sure, the thickness, the diameter, so many factors for sure.
Also, probably using hands as opposed to sticks, and right. And
Very
what do you
different
use?
sound.
Do you use your hands? I mean,
Well, I usually play the djembes at the drum circles, and that's definitely hand drumming. My medicine drum, I usually play with a beater or a mallet. You know, it's really a personal preference in the type of drum that you're playing.
What does drumming in a drum circle mean to you as an individual? Because I've been to some of your events, and I go there with one thing in mind, that I'm going to have a good old fun time, which I do, but when I get there, it kind of evolves to a more spiritual thing, and it's great. You do that thing with the sage. Does that have a special meaning, the sage?
Well, sage is basically used for, you know, cleansing and clearing. I have a very good friend who refers to it as a spiritual vacuum cleaner. So it's just a nice way to just kind of bring everybody down on a Friday night after a long week of working, and it smells really nice and balances, you know, the energy in the room, and people, you know, that are used to coming and doing that sort of thing feel good to be able to do that. So I pass that around the circle. Those who want to, you know, engage in that do. To me, drumming, the drum circles are really about community.
I like that term, though, spiritual vacuum cleaner, because I dance around my house when I vacuum. It'd be so much easier just to light some sage and let it do the work.
There
for
you
me,
go.
So, you know, I think I can get into this drumming thing.
Yeah,
Sure.
yeah, that's great.
I notice a lot of, I've been to a few drum circles, and I don't really have a drum, so I use compound buckets, but they have a nice tone.
They do, actually. I've seen people do it, you know, years ago on Venice Beach for the first time, and, you know, people actually bring them to the drum circles, and they bring all sorts of drums to the drum circles. There's so many types.
I was just telling some of my buddies the other day that I was down in Clearwater Beach, and there was a guy with 5 compound buckets, and he's going at it, boom, boom, boom. He was fantastic. So after the 20-minute solo, I kid you not, they filled up his bucket with dollar bills or tens or whatever. And so I went up to him and he said, "Man," I said, "You are really a great drummer. Why aren't you in a band?" He goes, and he shows me in his bucket, he goes, "Do I need to be in a band for $100 a day?" And, you know, this guy was making like $100 every 20 minutes. But, you know, drumming is drumming, like you said. I think babies probably, before they're born, can detect rhythm patterns.
Well, think about the main, you know, drum beat, you know, the central rhythm right here, right?
That's right. Right.
I know how it goes.
Well, it's funny you should mention babies and, you know, babies in the womb. And you mentioned something before off camera about even playing drums on water, didn't you? Using the water itself.
Well, you had mentioned Million Women Drummers Gathering up in New Paltz, and the founder of that, Ubaka Hill, who's, you know, internationally known drummer, has been drumming a long time. She actually I've seen her play drums on the water, on the lake. I live on a lake here in Dutchess County, and she's also played, you know, drums on the earth. And I have friends, you know, who will play on rafters in barns and things like that. So you can create a drum out of almost anything.
It's probably tough to mic the water, though.
That would be, yeah, that would be a little tricky.
You know, I was thinking though,
you do it from like with a boom.
I had a neighbor, you know, and I used to hear banging on the walls.
They all moved away, but
well, they did all move away. But when I did have neighbors, I used to hear the banging on the walls, and I thought that they were telling me to shut up, you know, and quiet down. But I guess they were just doing a little.
Well, look how many
They
people
were doing a
tap,
little
right?
Yeah.
People do nervous tapping, you know.
That's right. Well,
So
and there's the
it's a
Morse
release
code,
of energy.
right? It was a tapping thing. I wonder if that had, and there's also the drums, right? Wasn't that a form of communication at one time too?
Absolutely.
Right.
Mhm.
So
Sure.
it fits into kind
the
of
Native
almost-
Americans use that to communicate.
It's a form of communication, absolutely.
Yeah.
Ceremony.
It's cheaper than you know, telephones and, you know, cell phones. Maybe we should
Better
go
for
back
the
to
environment
that, you know?
too.
Good point.
I notice a lot of different types of drums. Can you tell us a little about the
Oh, I'd be
different
happy
types
to.
of drums that are used in a drum circle?
Sure.
Is it to one particular origin, or?
No, I suppose there are some circles that are, but ours is, you know, very open, whatever people want to bring. These are both djembes, and that's an African drum. The drum down here is actually my medicine drum. I use that drum for shamanic work and
That's the one you need,
spiritual work. Exactly.
Yeah, well, thank you
We've
for
got the
that
frame
one.
drums we've talked about. People bring tambourines. We've got people bringing rattles. People dance. Sometimes they'll bring even a flute, but it gets drowned out a little bit. But yeah, any instrument is fine. It's not really a string instrument type of environment, only because you really wouldn't hear the strings.
Right. Also, the artwork on it is beautiful. Can you tell us something about that?
Sure. This particular drum is made by a couple friends of mine who attend the drum circle, Dave and Tommy.
When you say make the drum, you mean the body, everything?
Well, they get the shells from a sustainable company in Africa. So these are trees that have already fallen. So these trees are not cut down to create these drums, which I really, really respect. The name of their company is Primal Percussions, and Tommy, who is one of the partners, actually does this henna work on the drum head. So he'll talk to you about what you want on your drum, and he'll help lay it out and design it for you and do the artwork.
That's beautiful. If those that don't know what henna is, it's a dye that I think came from Eastern Asia, where they actually apply this henna to your skin and it stains your skin.
Mm-hmm.
And being that the drum head is actually a skin, it works well, and that's really beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
And as an artist myself, I can appreciate that.
Well, it's a good way, if people know me as Hawkland, so obviously there's a hawk on there. It's a good way to personalize your drum too. And the drum,
I
mean,
love
it's a living thing. You've got the tree, you've got the animal skin.
Yeah.
You bring your personality into it. It really becomes part of who you are and of your art.
Well, let me guess. What would Cowboy have on his drum skin? That's a stretch. What do you think, Cowboy?
I would probably have a cow skull.
Yeah.
Anyway, I've also noticed there are other types of drums, like what do you call it, a djembe or something?
A doumbek.
A doumbek.
Doumbek, yeah, that's more Eastern culture.
Is that a deeper sound? Or?
It's actually sometimes like if you hear like a kirtan music, or I'm not sure if you're familiar with what kirtan is, but it's more of the spiritual Indian call and response type music. You'll hear a lot of doumbeks, and there's a lot of different types of Eastern drums that actually aren't really deeper. You can get deeper ones, you can get higher ones, depending again on the size of the drum and the tone. Beautiful sound, though.
Well, I'm really interested in the spiritual side of it, just the healing aspects of it and the feel good. And that's why I personally would think that it would be for that, and you correct me if I'm wrong, that one would use their hands on the drum, just feels like it's closer.
Well, absolutely. One of the things, like with a drum like this, if people, are educated, they realize that there's a grain, right? So animals have fur on them. So if you pet an animal this way, it's very soft. If you go that way, it's against the grain. The same is true with the skin. To honor the drum, you always want to make sure that the head is facing out. That's a custom. So all these little things come into it, from the indigenous cultures that we learn over time.
Where's the head of that drum, then?
I can actually have to feel it would be like this.
Oh, I see. So you can tell by feel.
Yeah, it's softer this way. It's a little bit against the grain. You can feel it that way. I've played this drum long enough now where you can't feel it quite as dominantly, but I also know the pattern of the drum by now. So,
Lynn, I know you really don't want to dwell on this next subject too much, but I noticed in some of your photos from your Facebook page, Drumming with Hawkland, is that the name of it?
yes.
You had quite a few pictures with birds of prey.
Mm-hmm.
Can you just tell us a little about that?
Oh, sure. I'd be happy to. I've had an interest in birds of prey since I was very young and lived out west. And I have volunteered at raptor facilities doing rehab work. I also got my falconer's license. I do a little bit different. A lot of falconers do it just for hunting. Some falconers do it just for rehabbing. I also bring it into the spiritual realm. I do teach spiritual classes at various locations and really enjoy that and really like, the totem meanings of the birds themselves.
What do you mean by rehabbing, though? You said some do it for rehabbing
The bird.
Well, birds, they'll get injured or,
Oh.
Poisoned or something like that, and they'll need, care, just like, us humans do, right?
Do you ever,
Our rehabbers are called doctors.
do you set them back in free when they're
Whenever
rehabbed?
possible. That's always that's always the goal, whenever possible.
And you work with it, well, whatever comes in as a rehab bird, but
Well,
red-tailed
licensing
hawk?
requirements, can be
Yeah.
very limiting. I work with red-tailed hawk, predominantly. Lady Z is a hawk that I've worked with for quite some time, and that's actually her on that drum. And
Mike has a little, what was that, a parakeet?
I do have a parakeet, yes, and
He
she
came
hails,
to
she
go-
hails me,
I believe it. I believe it.
So, anyway.
So you were asking me a little bit, before about my my music background, not really sure I got into too much of the business end of it, but I used to travel with Deep Purple on the road. So it's interesting to kind of draw the the likenesses of what I'm doing now versus what I was doing then, because they're so different. But that was a lot of fun too. So then you've got a whole different kind of drum kit, right?
Deep Purple's the real heavy metal band. Smoke on the Water, right? Wasn't that?
Smoke on the Water was one of their biggest hits. Richie Blackmore, yeah.
And I don't want to give away my age, but when I was a youngin',
I'll give it away.
when I was a youngin', we all had CB radios. Is that what they were called? CB radios? And we all had handles.
My time. I don't know.
And my
Right.
handle was Highway Star, which was Deep Purple song.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Ian Gillan, I believe, wrote that song. He was the lead singer for many years.
That must have been pretty funsy traveling with them.
Well, it was great. I was fortunate enough to be with the original lineup during their last tour, The Battle Rages On. And the last show that they did was in Helsinki, Finland, and I was there for that last show. It was spirited, as many of them were. But it was really a great experience for me, and working for the management for those guys was a lot of fun for me. I met a lot of really interesting people and traveled to a lot of really interesting places, for sure.
We're waiting for the book, Hawkland. I know there's got to be a book.
I think other people have already written that book by now. But
I'm sure. But how do you go then from that to traveling with a rock band and what all that brings, and then having this drum circle that you do now? How did that evolve?
Well, I guess they're related somehow, but they don't really feel related to me. I got it more on a spiritual path later in my life. It's always been in me, but actually getting on that path and drumming spiritually, I wasn't doing any of that back then. So it feels a little bit separate. It just happened to lead me down, this road, this little side street.
I think music is music, and it all ties in somehow. And I mean, personally, I like all forms of music. I like blues, I like country. Sometimes I even like your songs.
Well, I'm flattered by since you put your name on the songs that I write, so I am flattered by that.
Well, you give me one word to one of my songs, and I have to give you co-writing.
And I appreciate that.
Well, we should collaborate sometime.
Well, you should come to one of our shows, because if you said that your small circles are only 30, that's a big show for us. So you bring your drum circle there. We'll have a whole crowd, and work out fine for just everybody.
We could do that.
Get to tell
we could do that.
That is so funny.
We'll
that
bring
you
the rhythm section.
Listen to me. I wrote a song called "Stand Together."